This morning, the mining project that is either critical to America's clean energy future or a pending mess in the American West, depending on who you speak with. The mining site in question in Idaho has a long and storied history. Now it's back in the news as a new company seeks to reopen the mine that hasn't been used in more than 2 decades. They believe they can remove billions of dollars of gold buried in the ground while fixing damage done in the past and increasing national security. Not everyone is buying. Our trip to the mining site in central Idaho took us through some of the wildest land in the country, over mountains and past landslides, eventually arriving in remote yellow pine and stibnite. For 150 years, miners have come here seeking to dig their fortune. The latest arrival, Perpetua Resources. Laurel Sayer is the CEO.
We still need gold in society today. It's not just used for jewelry. We use it in electronics. It's a very valuable mineral that we use.
The Stibnite Mine was abandoned in the 1990s, but a toxic legacy was left behind. Changes to the river that flows through the mine site meant fish spawning upstream were left without clear passage to the Pacific Ocean. Perpetua says they can clean up the mess left behind by, for one, reconnecting the river.
The first thing we do is pick up hundreds of thousands of yards of tails and move those so that those are no longer contaminating the site.
Plus, they say there's another big reason to dig: antimony, a chemical element that's a byproduct of the gold extraction process and something that's crucial for the production of green technology, including batteries for electric vehicles. In the 1940s, antimony mined here and used in the production of ammunition helped the U.S. win World War II. Today, the vast majority is produced in China and Russia, none in the U.S., which some say is a national security risk.
If we sit and do nothing, we will never solve this problem. We want to do something now because we're already behind. So if there is an opportunity to help advance the clean energy agenda for the U.S., we should be doing it.
Not everyone agrees. The 13.2 million acres that make up the section of Idaho where the mine is located was the original home of a Native American tribe known as the Nez Perce, or Nimipu.
Just probably 40 miles this side of Spokane, you're in our traditional territory.
Nakia Williamson feels after losing their land of the gold rush of the 1800s, the Nimipu have given enough.
We've had to sustain so much loss already with many other impacts that have happened to the land, the utter transformation of this landscape, and one more impact could be too much for us to sustain.
It's an enormous mine, and it's going to increase almost over 2 times the size as it is now. Right down there.
Emmett Taylor is another tribal leader who we met at the South Fork of the Salmon River, which once contained the most thriving population of Chinook salmon in the world.
I remember my niece catching her first salmon here, Liana.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Today, because of pollutants like those released from mining operations in the past, overfishing, and dams that block fish migration, it's estimated only 1% of the salmon that used to run this section of the river remain.
Our whole goal is to try to restore the fishery, bring the fishery back, to get the salmon back to a sustainable level for an ecological standpoint and also from a harvest standpoint.
It's a complex issue. There's a lot of stakeholders.
The Nimipu are not the only ones pushing back on the Perpetua plan. Nick Nelson is the executive director of Idaho Rivers United. If this project happens a generation from now, what do you think this portion of the country looks like?
I see a huge scar at the headwaters of the South Fork of the Salmon. I see what could be a sterile river. With the mining company and the area that they'll be working in and all of the different conditions that are there, it's not a question of if a spill is ever going to occur or if an accident's ever going to occur. It's a matter of when.
Perpetua does have many supporters, including politicians and locals. Lynn Immel has lived in the tiny town of Yellow Pine near the mine since 1968. How old is this crucible?
This is probably from the late 1800s.
The prospect of new jobs and a reconnected river is intriguing for those like her who remain.
I'm totally in favor of the mine, and the mess that is left has to be cleaned up.
There are some who feel there's going to be a whole new mess left behind after.
I think the regulations will totally control it.
You think government's not going to clean that up, but you think private industry can?
I think they will.
How long would the mining last for?
15 years. We have always been transparent about who we are and what we're doing up here, that we're a modern mining project.
What does a modern mining project mean?
We put in, for example, the restoration part of our project. We're actually restoring habitat for the fish and the critters that they can thrive up here once we're done, and it's even before we're done.
If their plan and the science were as good as their PR were, then I'd have a lot less concerns about it, but it really isn't.
At some point, we have to shift away from fossil fuels, move away from them. Extracting metals like this allows that to happen. Why is that a bad idea?
This isn't an anti-extraction or an anti-mining campaign. It's, mining needs to be done. We all recognize that, but it needs to be done responsibly, and there are certain locations that it's never going to be irresponsible.
Last year, the Environmental Protection Agency said it had significant concerns about harm to fish and that water treatment at the site would be needed forever. Perpetua revised that plan and said they'll shrink the mine's footprint and lessen the impact on the environment. The review process of that new plan has just been extended for another 2 years. Idaho Rivers United and the Namipu consider that a victory for now.
We are accountable to this land, and we are the voice for this land. And so it's our responsibility to continue to advocate for those that no longer have the voice and has been imparted to us, and that's the responsibility that we carry as Namipu.
Do you believe there's a compromise here?
I really struggle to find a compromise here from what they want to do.
When I asked the tribe if they thought there was any room for compromise, they said no. Can you do this project without them?
I would hope that they wouldn't say no forever, and I would hope that they would come to the table and we could fix this. The permitting process does allow us to move forward, but our door is always open. We want to find a compromise. We want to work with them.
Such beautiful land and such a tough debate. No matter what happens, you're talking long term here. If it gets approved, you're talking years of construction, then 15 to 20 years of mining. And I think a lot of people are just wondering, whatever happens here, what this area is going to look like a generation from now.
And I love that the tribe speaks for the land. You want them on your side. You don't want to do it without them.
Yeah, and that this is playing out, though, in a public way. I think that's so important, that this discussion is actually taking place, whereas this is something that didn't always happen, as we well know, in our history in the past.
Transparency.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. Good story.
Sure.